Whispers beneath the Dutch ledgers. It began with entries so subtle they almost went unnoticed, quiet lines of ink that hinted at something larger stirring beneath the surface. Traders believed they understood the forces powering their republic, yet a different engine was humming out of sight. It promised stability. It promised profit. And for a time, it delivered both. To understand how a set of Dutch ledgers reshaped the fate of markets across Europe, we need to return to an era when the Republic stood at the center of global trade. Ships from distant horizons filled its harbors, carrying spices, silk, and the wealth of entire empires. But prosperity comes with fragility, and the Dutch understood a truth that many empires learned too late: commerce needs order, predictable systems, and a foundation strong enough to bear the weight of ambition. That foundation would soon emerge, not from a royal decree, but from the meticulous work of clerks and merchants who saw opportunity where others saw risk. The story begins in a bustling exchange hall where voices rose like the tides. Prices shifted with every shouted offer. Fortunes changed hands before the ink dried on a contract. Yet beneath this chaos ran a quieter current, one shaped not by noise but by numbers. A group of merchants recognized that the Republic's trading dominance was strained by outdated payment methods. Coins were scarce. Settlements lagged. Disputes clogged the arteries of commerce. They envisioned a new system, one where transactions unfolded with precision, where trust flowed as readily as merchandise. So they created a bank unlike any other, a structured entity that demanded discipline from its clients and offered stability in return. Every deposit became a promise, every withdrawal a reflection of meticulous record-keeping. The city's merchants embraced it eagerly. After all, predictable finance meant predictable trade, and predictable trade meant prosperity. But as the ledgers filled, something unexpected took root. The bank's influence began stretching far beyond its walls. At first, no one questioned this rise. The system functioned beautifully. Mistakes were rare. Fraud became difficult. Markets grew bolder. Yet in the spaces between those elegant rows of ink, power accumulated, quiet, unwavering, and almost invisible. And as the Republic expanded its reach across seas and continents, the bank became the silent heartbeat of an empire built not on conquest, but on commerce. Still, beneath the optimism, a question lingered. What happens when a system designed to bring order becomes the mechanism through which chaos can spread? In the ledgers that shaped a marketplace, the earliest hints of trouble had already begun to appear, faint but undeniable, waiting for the moment when they could no longer be ignored. The bank's ledgers grew heavier with each passing season, filled with transactions that linked merchants, cities, and distant colonies in webs of obligation. What began as a simple tool to streamline payments now shaped the rhythm of the entire republic. Traders settled accounts with an ease their ancestors could scarcely imagine. Ship captains relied on credit lines rather than chests of silver. And the clerks, once overlooked figures behind high wooden counters, became guardians of the system that kept the republic's heart beating. Yet as the institution flourished, so did unease among those who watched its influence rise. Members of the city council murmured about the growing concentration of financial power. Some suspected that the bank's rigid rules placed too much trust in the hands of a small elite, while others feared the reverse, that its success made it a tempting tool for political manipulation. But the complaints remained whispers, drowned out by the steady hum of commerce. The model proved so strong that foreign traders flocked to use it, grateful for stability in a world fractured by war and shifting alliances. Their reliance, however, introduced new vulnerabilities. When a distant partner defaulted or a colony reported losses from a failed expedition, the consequences traveled quickly through the ledgers. Small discrepancies magnified. Small delays sparked tension. Behind the scenes, the clerks noticed patterns that troubled them: deposits shrinking in certain accounts, withdrawals rising in others, and balances drifting in directions that no honest trade could explain. Inside the bank, debates grew sharper. Should they tighten their rules to defend against mounting risks? Or would stricter controls alienate merchants who had come to depend on the bank's flexibility? Every change promised stability for some and hardship for others. And every hesitation allowed risks to deepen, settling into the system like cracks in stone. Meanwhile, independent brokers on the exchange sensed that something was shifting. They saw prices behaving oddly, reacting not to supply or demand but to whispers about liquidity. Some blamed politics. Others blamed foreign wars. But the few who understood the mechanics of the bank's operations began to suspect a deeper problem: too much trust had been concentrated in too few places. Still, the public saw only prosperity. Ships arrived and departed. Goods changed hands. The Republic shone brighter than ever. No one wished to believe that the very system built to safeguard trade might be vulnerable to the pressures gathering beyond the horizon. And when early signs of strain appeared, missed payments, delayed transfers, unusual corrections in the ledgers, they were dismissed as temporary misfortunes. But beneath the ink, the numbers told a different story. A story of imbalances growing wider, of confidence stretched thin, and of a system that had quietly crossed the line between resilience and fragility. The next shock, whenever it arrived, would not remain confined to a page. It would spill outward into the markets themselves, shaping the fate of merchants, cities, and the republic they supported. The turning point arrived not through a single catastrophic event, but through a chain of subtle disruptions that converged with unnerving precision. A shipment delayed in the east, a fleet damaged in a storm, a foreign ally late on its payments. Each setback alone was manageable. Together, they formed a pressure the bank had never fully anticipated. The ledgers no longer reflected the calm predictability the Republic relied upon. They pulsed instead with warning signs, small at first, then unmistakable. Clerks noticed the change before anyone else. Columns that once balanced with a satisfying certainty drifted out of alignment. Accounts showed unexplained gaps, obligations that depended on funds still sailing across oceans. They worked late into the night, adjusting figures, verifying entries, hoping the distortions were temporary. Yet every correction revealed another discrepancy, each more troubling than the last. The system that had always felt solid now seemed to shift beneath their feet like wet sand. As days passed, tension spread to the exchange. Brokers sensed the unease, watching as confidence thinned among traders who had once acted without hesitation. A few began refusing certain drafts, insisting on coins rather than credits. It was not a rebellion, it was fear wearing the mask of prudence. And once that fear seeped in, it moved quickly, passing from one trader to the next in quiet conversations and wary glances. Markets that had thrived on trust now trembled at its slightest fracture. Within the bank's inner chambers, disputes turned fierce. Senior officials pushed for emergency measures, freeze questionable accounts, limit withdrawals, strengthen reserves. But such actions risked signaling that the bank itself was uncertain, and uncertainty was the most dangerous currency of all. Others argued that intervention would only accelerate panic, that patience and calm were the only defenses left. Each side knew the danger in their position. Each side understood the cost of being wrong. Outside, the city braced itself without knowing why. Prices shifted unpredictably. Merchants postponed large orders. Foreign partners demanded updates the bank could not provide. Even the harbor felt the change. Ships lingered longer before departing, captains waiting to be sure the letters of credit they carried would still hold value by the time they reached distant shores. Then the shock arrived. A major trading consortium, one of the Republic's most prestigious, disclosed losses so severe they threatened its survival. The announcement rippled through the ledgers like a tremor through glass. Credits linked to the consortium suddenly appeared doubtful. Balances that had been counted as secure now seemed uncertain. And because the bank had interwoven its stability with the fortunes of the merchants it served, the blow landed not on a single institution but across the entire financial network. The ledgers reacted instantly. Numbers shifted, reserves tightened, obligations multiplied. What had been an elegant system of mutual trust became a map of vulnerabilities. The clerks, once calm stewards of orderly records, now chronicled the unraveling in real time, every entry a reflection of pressure mounting beyond their control. Rumors filled the streets. Was the bank exposed? Had the Republic overreached? Were the fortunes of thousands now tied to a single failing enterprise? Unanswered questions swirled through markets already unsteady from weeks of tension. And as confidence drained, the bank found itself confronting the one scenario it had hoped never to face, a crisis in which every solution carried the risk of igniting the very panic it sought to avoid. The Dutch ledgers, once symbols of precision and order, had become mirrors showing how swiftly an empire of commerce could bend under its own weight. And with each passing hour, the space for preventing collapse grew narrower. The crisis reached its peak on a morning when the city seemed unusually quiet, as if waiting for news that everyone feared but no one could name. Traders gathered early, unsure whether the day would bring relief or ruin. The exchange hall filled with a dense, nervous stillness broken only by the sound of clerks arriving from the bank, their faces pale, their ledgers pressed tightly under their arms. No words were exchanged, yet the silence said everything. Inside the bank, the final calculations painted a stark picture. The trading consortium's collapse had triggered obligations woven through dozens of accounts, and the imbalance threatened to drain reserves faster than the institution could replenish them. For the first time since its founding, the bank faced the possibility that its carefully constructed system might not withstand the sudden shock. A decision had to be made, one that would reshape not only the bank's future but the republic's. The city council was summoned. In a chamber usually reserved for deliberation and calm debate, urgency replaced ceremony. The bank's leaders presented their figures, their projections, their fears. The council listened in grim silence. Everyone understood the stakes. If the bank faltered, the republic's commerce would falter with it. Ships would remain in harbor. Credit would freeze. The engine driving the nation's prosperity could grind to a halt in a matter of days. At last, a proposal emerged. The council would provide emergency backing, drawing on funds set aside for times of war and national threat. In return, the bank would accept oversight stricter than anything it had known before. Transparency would replace secrecy. Restraint would replace ambition. And the ledgers that had once empowered merchants to dream bigger would now become symbols of accountability and caution. It was a painful compromise, but it offered a path forward. As the agreement took shape, a quiet sense of containment spread among those in the room. The crisis was not over, not yet, but the Republic had chosen to confront it with unity rather than allow uncertainty to tear through its foundations. When the decision was announced, the effect was immediate. Merchants paused their panic. Foreign partners, reassured by the government's intervention, delayed their withdrawals. Slowly, hesitantly, confidence began to return. The markets, though shaken, did not collapse. The ledgers, those once trembling pillars, held firm once more. In the days that followed, the Republic reflected on how close it had come to disorder. It realized that a system built on trust requires more than careful bookkeeping, it requires vigilance, honesty, and limits. And so the bank entered a new era, one defined not by unchecked power but by the recognition that even the strongest institutions must answer to the society they serve. What happened in the Dutch ledgers long ago still echoes today. Every modern effort to manage risk, every debate over financial stability, every oversight structure owes something to the lessons carved into those pages. For in the end, the Republic learned a truth we still grapple with: prosperity is fragile, and trust, once shaken, must be rebuilt with care, clarity, and intention. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future.